Hey friends, thanks for joining me again, and today I have 6 tips on how you can plant a fruit orchard in a very limited amount of space. Of course, this is my specialty kind of thing, being able to find ways to make things work and fit in smaller spaces. That's what my whole little homestead was all about last time, and while I still have to employ some of those tactics here, less so than I used to, but I'm still using them. And so I just really wanted to share those with you because I really want to give people hope that even if you don't have a whole lot of space, you can use a lot of these tactics. And even if you have a lot of space, if you have limited amounts of or pockets of space where you can actually grow things like fruit trees and whatnot, a bunch of mature like shade trees or something like that, then it would make it to where you can actually grow things. So here we go with my 6 tips. The first one I've already covered, and it's actually dwarf or semi-dwarf trees. Semi-dwarf trees stay a little bit smaller than full-size trees, which can be helpful. I'm planting basically all semi-dwarf or dwarf trees here in my yard this year, and the reason is because I'm planting them in places where there are power lines and things like that, and if I were to plant, say, a full-size tree, it would grow up into the power lines. So if you have the same issue, if you have power lines around your house and you're like, well, I don't want to plant trees right under them, dwarf or semi-dwarf options may be a good option for those types of areas. So definitely keep those in mind. They can stay very small and they don't usually grow to be too tall, but you definitely want to make sure you check with the tags because they can be a little different. There are certain semi-dwarfs that only get 10 or 12 feet tall, and then there are semi-dwarfs that get like 15 to 18 feet tall, and that might be too tall for you. So choose the right variety, definitely, but dwarfs and semi-dwarfs can be an excellent option. And really quickly, I do want to point out this tree right behind me here is actually a dwarf tree. It is what they call a columnar, and basically columnar column, it grows in basically like a column. So instead of it spreading out like typical fruit trees do, it stays very compact and upright. And yet they grow a fair amount of fruit. And these are actually known very well for growing the fruit the very next year after you plant them. So I'm really excited that, this apple tree right here might grow fruit very next year. So I'm really excited about that. The next one is going to be Espalier or Espalier. It's kind of weird to pronounce, and I was looking online for the correct pronunciation, and I guess there's actually a couple of, official correct pronunciations. But basically what it means is, and I'll insert a picture here in a quick second, but it's basically a tree that's designed to grow flat. So they actually prune it in a way to make it to where it grows flat so you can grow it up against a wall or something like that. And this is a really good way to be able to fit in fruit trees. If say you have like a walkway and then a wall or something like that, you can grow a fruit tree right in that area without worrying it's going to take over, which is great. So you do have to keep these pruned, and they don't usually grow as much fruit as say another semi-dwarf tree or something that's really been able to like sprawl, but this is definitely a good option for those that have very limited amounts of space, or if you need to grow it up against a fence or up against a wall, like I said, these fruit trees that you can actually grow flat almost like a vine, but it's a tree, which is pretty doggone cool. And I've even seen some of these at big box stores. Like I saw some at Lowe's last year, and they were actually fairly reasonably priced. And the next option is going to be planting fruit trees extra close together. Now, I cannot find anywhere where this is actually a thing that has a name, but this is actually a very common practice. Again, Lowe's, which seems to have a lot of stuff that's working for small spaces, but they actually sell a variety where there are 2 trees in the same pot, and then they twist it together so that when it grows, basically one will grow in one direction, the other will grow in the other, and then they're able to cross-pollinate amongst each other and stuff like that, which is really cool. So if you actually planted them separately, they would grow to be bigger trees, and they would need a lot of space between the 2 of them, but because you're growing them extra close, they actually sort of dwarf each other, keep each other small, and stay in a smaller amount of space. At Lowe's, and I just had to show it, they have 3 of these little twisty apples, so this is what they look like. There are 2 of them, and then they twist them together so that they actually grow like one. So see how this one grows sort of this way, and this one grows sort of that way? That's pretty neat, I say. So there'll be 2 different varieties of apples on the same tree when you get these types. Sweet 16 and Honeycrisp. Brauburn and Gala, or Brayburn, I'm not sure. Red Delicious and Yellow Delicious, all on the same tree with this space-saving technique. This is something I did a while back when I didn't think I had room for cherry trees. I planted those back in '09, and I knew that those needed to cross-pollinate and that I needed to have more than one variety in order to achieve that, but I only had room for one tree. So I did some research and I found out that this is a thing. You plant them extra close together and what it does is, again, it dwarfs each other. So I planted a Rainier and a Bing Cherry right next to each other. I think they were probably planted about 2 feet apart or so. And that's exactly what happened. One tree grew mainly in one direction, the other tree mainly grew in the other direction, and they were beautiful, healthy trees that produced a lot of fruit. So I was really happy with that arrangement. So yeah, plant them extra close together, but you have to be careful about which varieties and things you can choose for this. And so, you know, it might take a little bit extra research before you may want to choose this option. The next option is going to be a grafted tree. Grafting is actually when you cut into the side of a tree and then you put the bud of a different tree, and then basically what it does is it just adopts it as its own, and then it grows it as its own branch. Usually you have to do this within the same genus, so you can put different species on the same plant as long as they're the same genus. So you can have a cherry tree that can grow, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of cherries all on one tree just by grafting a whole bunch of different buds. But it's not just cherries that you can do this with. You can actually do this with a huge variety of different things. You can have an apple tree that grows a whole bunch of different types of apples, or even just a few, you know. So if you wanted both baking apples and fresh eating apples, you can get that on one tree with a grafted tree, which is pretty neat. So it's not only useful for cross-pollination, but it can also be useful in getting multiple varieties of things all on one tree. So this is definitely a very good option in my opinion. However, I do think that grafted trees that are bought locally are better quality than the ones that are bought online. So do keep that in mind. I'm at the Home Depot actually looking at their specialty fruit tree section. This tree actually has 5 different apples on one tree. Granny Smith, Fuji, Red Delicious, Yellow Delicious, and Gravenstein all in one tree. So it's gonna grow a lot of different types of apples in just this one tree. So the next one is going to be a multi-use of space. So this is something I used a lot at my last house. And basically what I did is I would have like an apple tree, and then the goat yard would be around that apple tree. Of course, I had to protect the apple tree so the goats didn't hurt it, but so I ended up having my peach tree in a yard where my chickens were, and so it's just a multi-use of space. Instead of saying, well, we're going to do fruit trees here and then animals there, you can actually kind of double that up and then make it to where, you know, the chickens are actually living under the shade of a fruit tree so that you can still get what you're looking for. You don't have to have 2 different spaces for it. It can actually be one space that's actually multi-use, which is very helpful. So yeah, I think that made it to where the chickens were able to fertilize, and then it was easier to water because it was so close, you know, to take care of the fruit trees plus the chickens, and you know, it was just an all-around beneficial thing. So multi-uses of space to where you use, you know, one space for multi-purpose is definitely a good option as well, and I'm doing that again this year too. And so the last one is going to be just utilizing the outside perimeter of the yard. This is probably one of my favorites because it seems like we don't want to fill our whole entire yard with trees. You know, that would make it to where we can't, you know, play. And obviously I have kids, and so we need to be able to have, you know, space for them to be able to like run around and do their thing. And, you know, if we wanted to play, you know, kickball or soccer or something in the yard, we definitely still want some grassy area to where we can still have fun and just be a, you know, ordinary family. But we also want to have those fruit trees. So by planting them on the outside perimeter, you know, along the fence line kind of, it makes it to where you can actually put a fair amount of trees in, you know, without them being in the way, if that makes sense. So that's what I'm doing this year with mine. That's what I did last year or last time with my last house, and all of these tactics worked really well. So for those of you who have small space restrictions and you would like to have a little fruit orchard, hopefully this, you know, is helpful to you, and you know, these are tactics that you can use to help achieve that little fruit orchard even if you don't have a whole lot of space. So anyway, I'm Frugal Green Girl, and I would love to hear from you, and you know, what tactics that you have used and what's been helpful to you, and you know, different ways that you've been able to achieve it. So I hope to hear from you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.